Hello, seventh grade students. This week's lesson is on the Renaissance. This is week 2 of distance learning. Uh, we are going to be learning about a time period in history called the Renaissance in Europe. We are going to identify what caused the Renaissance to happen and make connections between famous historical figures of the Renaissance and Renaissance values. Your due date for this lesson is on Friday, as all of our lessons on distance learning are going to be. And the deadlines are going to be a week later. So for globalization, that was due last Friday, and the deadline for that is May 1st, this Friday. So yes, you have deadlines, but you also have lessons coming up. So the best thing to do is to get the lessons done in order and on time. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to take you through connecting globalization, the idea of globalization, to the Renaissance. Then you're going to learn what the Renaissance is and a vocabulary activity. And then finally, you're going to have a little mini research project on a Renaissance figure. Because there's a lot of ideas about the Renaissance, but the figure and the people who create the art in the Renaissance have become very well known. So it's going to be a good lesson on that. So I'm connecting globalization to the Renaissance. And here we have a globalization definition: the way countries and peoples of the world interact and integrate economically, politically, and socially that can have both benefits and costs for a nation. So countries and the people of the world interacting and integrating, that is going to be a big idea on what causes the Renaissance. Well, what is the Renaissance? You'll see this in another slide soon, but it is a French word meaning rebirth. And it is a time period that rebirth of Greek and Roman ideas about life, philosophy, and art come back into fashion in Europe. They were not as well. They just weren't as studied before this time period. And now they become more into people's ideas, more into what people are writing about, what people are painting about. And this happens in Europe starting in about the 1300s. So we have to think about what we finished with in Europe. We finished with Europe at the end of Unit 2. And I have 6 events here. And I'm asking you, which one of these events led to more trade in Europe starting in the 1200s? Think about that for a few seconds. Okay. There's actually 2 answers on this list. The one that I think all classes did were the Crusades, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. But also the Mongol Empire was also a reason for more trade in Europe. What the Mongol Empire did was unify a lot of Asia so that people from Asia could trade more with Europe. And that's a big part of it. It's a very interesting part of history, but we're going to focus on the Crusades as far as helping this increase trade. So I have a couple of readings from Britannica about the Crusades. And what we're going to do is, after thinking about what happened at the end of the Crusades, you're going to answer some questions, completion questions, to connect globalization to the Renaissance, this idea of trading. Let me read these out. The Crusades opened up trade contact with the East, and new foods and textiles began to appear in the markets and fairs of Europe. The new products included spices, cane sugar, buckwheat, rice, apricots, watermelons, oranges, limes, lemons, cotton, damask, satin, velvet, and dye stuffs. Europeans also learned the art of paper making from Muslims. So here, once the Crusades were over, and there was these battles where Christians and Muslims didn't really like each other, and they were fighting. But after the Crusades, they were like, well, the Muslims, they're not Christian, and we don't like them for that. We think they should believe in Jesus as a Christian, right? That's what Christians believe in. but they have a lot of things to trade. And so that's what happened after the Crusades. Is we see more trading between Christian areas and Muslim areas. And the main region of Europe that helped or that was most benefited from this was Italy. Okay. This is from high school level, so this may be a little bit more complicated, but I thought it had a good part in here about what happened in Italy. The sectors acquired by burgeoning Italian cities in the Crusader states enabled them to extend their trade with the Muslim world and led to the establishment of trade depots, kind of trade centers, beyond the Crusade frontier, some of which lasted long after 1291. The transportation they provided was significant in the development of shipbuilding techniques. Italian banking facilities became indispensable to popes and kings. So Italy had these city states, cities that controlled their own little area. It was not a united country like we have it today, of the country of Italy. It was an area that had different city states. And here we see in this, hopefully you see that this is Italy. The city states were like Bologna, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Florence, Rome, Naples, Pisa, Milan. Those were different city states in Italy. And the reading that we had, let me move myself over here. The reading that we had said that they made connections in this part of the world, right here, and they started to send goods to Italy. And the two city states that had those shipbuilding techniques, the most famous ones were Genoa and Venice. Genoa and Venice were the shipbuilding cities. And so they became very wealthy with having this new trade, these new trade routes that people in Europe wanted to getting to Italy. Okay, so with that kind of background, noting that Italian city states really benefited from these new trade routes, now you're going to answer these questions. Describe how post Crusade trade is an example of globalization. Yes, even though we are not talking about the whole globe. Okay, it's not yet that everybody. There are people in the world that know about all different places of the globe, but in this case, it is more connections between Europe and Asia. So you may need to go back to the globalization definition and think about how this post Crusade trade fits into that definition. Then we have how did Italian cities benefit economically from this post Crusade trade globalization? Even if you talk about Venice and Genoa, that's fine. And I look forward to seeing a lot of your answers. And the next teacher will take you on to talk more about what exactly the Renaissance is. Have a great day.